Honestly, that I should talk to photographers more because this was such an amazing scenario situation to be able to talk to photographers, people who work as clients sometimes, because you try to have these conversations on a day-to-day basis, but when it's your clients and when there's money involved, it's a bit more difficult to have these honest conversations.
It was really refreshing to hear their take on photography rights, for example, distribution, how we deal with images, things we often take for granted, and what our role in the industry is to advise and guide other people and share our knowledge to make it a better place for everyone eventually. Yeah.
We need to do more to educate both photographers and clients and businesses about the differences between usage rights, or basically what each term in a contract is. And at GPP, we do a lot of photo video education, but historically it's been mostly on the how to be a photographer, videographer side. Perhaps there's also a space to do something about how to hire photographers and how to hire videographers.
The industry needs to be educated on how photographers work and how their images need to be used and how they can be licensed. They have to be educated on usage rights, on distribution, on pricing, because most of the time images are shot for a client, but then those images are distributed electronically to different suppliers that work on the project. And when that happens, the photographer loses out on potential clients.
Contracts are super important. I often tell photographers, or even the team, like, you have to think in contracts basically. So if something's going to change on a project, which always happens, your first thought should be, how is this reflected in the contract?
You really look more professional. It sets the boundaries from the beginning. You can sit down, negotiate. Everything is written, your price, how much costs the image retouching, how much costs this, how much you're gonna charge for flight, or for recce days and so on. So I think it has its own value.
It's also important to develop relationships that sort of don't substitute contracts, but that are not as dependent on contracts. And I think that when you have those relationships with clients where there's mutual trust, then contracts can become secondary.
So without the contracts, actually, it will be very hard to deal with the photography credentials. It will be very hard for the photographer as well to market for his work. So the contract and the brief is actually one document that I usually spend more time with the client. We have a coordination, we have like workshops to agree on every perspective and every point in the contract and the brief before we starting the work.
I like to tell the photographer a bit about the project. So everything that the photographer does is about storytelling, right? And we want to capture the story through the interior. So telling them a bit about the client brief and our solution to that. We also like sharing the renderings. So we say, okay, these are the views that we definitely want. And then anything else that they want to bring to the table or shoot there. How many images we want. So usually we say at least 6 to 10. And if we're going to be sending them to any sort of like clients, suppliers.
When a design company approaches me, I expect to have a very detailed brief, because if they approach me with a requirement like a day rate, that kind of doesn't exist, because my proposal would be based on what exactly the client wants. And that could be like the number of images, the location of the project, and the kind of project and the scale of the project.
I'm pretty much obsessed with all these small little things and details. I'm so impressed. Like when I see the people behind, like how much effort and passion they put in the project. It is important, at least for me, to understand. Also, it reflects on the end photography. I need to understand what's the core, what's the most important element of this building.
So usually within our agency, we only advise on photography. Some photographers, they shoot what we would call for a portfolio or for a website, and I think it's our job as kind of matchmakers in that sense that we know how certain publications like to see certain things photographed, when it comes to lighting or angles, or, we're very particular about these things. So we usually advise them.
I am the buffer between photographers and clients, and I think the idea is to benefit both sides. So for the photographers, I need to make sure that the client gives us a proper brief, that the photographer goes into the situation, into the shoot, knowing everything that they need to accomplish. They are the best prepared to face the situation on the set. And then for clients, it's also very important to help them clarify what it is that they're looking for exactly, so that they're not surprised once they see the results and they feel like they've gotten exactly what they wanted to.
So a DAM system, a digital asset management system, basically just tracks each piece of content or information. Doesn't have to necessarily be photos and videos, anything that's a digital asset. It's a place to store all the usage instances and the fees and the contracts and all the metadata. So an agency kind of works like a DAM for photographers and videographers, in that they trust the agency to make sure that all the usage terms are outlined clearly and the client is aware of them at all times, etc.
So my biggest takeaway was the fact that there aren't really any market prices when it comes to photography, because we always talk about like market prices and market rates, whereas actually you're just paying a photographer for what they bring to the table and their expertise.
So the biggest takeaway from today's talk is the relation between the photographers and the client and the consultants, the designers.
The biggest takeaway from today's talk was emphasizing the importance of connecting with people in your industry. So if you're interior designers, connect with interior designers you are getting inspired by. If you're a photographer, reach out to other photographers. If you're an architect, reach out to other architects and learn what they do, and maybe you can learn from each other.